Hello, fifth grade. I wanted to walk you through now adding shading and shadows to your 3D forms that you've made. So you might have already started drawing the stack of shapes, but the final step is to add shading. You can see from these two examples that shading really makes a difference. Shading is what's on the object. Like say if one side is not getting as much light as the other, it will appear to be darker, like right here. That's shading. Shadows are what's cast on the ground, where light is being blocked from hitting a surface. So if you want something to appear to be 3D, you need to add shading and shadows. And we're going to do this with just a standard old pencil. If we were back in class, we'd also have these things that are called blending stubs that instead of your finger, you can use to blend the pencil marks, but we don't have any of that. Most of you probably don't anyway. If you have one of those and you know how to use it, great. Go ahead and use it for this project because they do come in some art kits. The big thing we have to talk about is how to know where you're going to shade on the shape. So there's a big difference between how you shade flat-sided objects and how you shade rounded objects. And we would spend an entire class period going over the difference and doing a practice worksheet together. We're not going to do that since we're doing remote learning, but I do want to give you at least some idea so you're prepared for sixth grade of how you can do this and at least attempt this on your shapes. It will look so much more 3D if you do that. So the first thing I want to go over is shading rounded forms. So this is one of the ones I did for our practice video last week. These are all rounded forms, mostly cylinders here, it looks like. Actually, this is all cylinders, so I'll have to draw a couple extras on here. But what I wanted to point out is that when light hits rounded shapes, it behaves differently than when it hits flat-sided shapes. So here's a roll of tape I happen to have around. It's rounded. Here's a marker. When something, it's black, so that's a little hard to see. Okay, so here's a roll of blue painter's tape. The light is actually coming from this direction. You can't see here, but I have a window, and it's hitting the tape here. Now, it's kind of a reflective surface, so you get a little bit of what's known as a highlight, where there's like a strip that looks very white. And then it's sort of like gradually kind of getting darker. There's not like one single dark line where one side stops and the other begins. And it's actually a little bit darker over here too from the way the light is falling in the room. With reflective surfaces, it looks a little different. I also have a paper towel roll here to show you some different. This one you see a little bit more gradual change. It's lighter here towards where the sun is coming through the window, and it's darker on this side, and then you see the shadow that's cast onto the paper. And you notice too, the shadow is not completely black. Sometimes students really try to darken in shadows and show them as completely black, and that's not the case. So put that in the way. So when I shade rounded shapes, in fact, I'll keep this the same idea. I'll make like some little marks here so I remember that my light source is coming from the upper right. And you can choose if you want from the upper right or upper left. You don't want to probably get too complicated and having it like from the lower left and then there's a spotlight on another side. That gets pretty complicated. I would stick with either right or left for your first try at this kind of thing. So if my light is coming from the right, I'm going to darken the opposite side, the left, because the light's hitting over here, so it would stay light. And so I could just take my pencil and I could kind of lightly at first just kind of darken in that, and then I can take my fingers if I want to and kind of smudge it away. Otherwise, sometimes I'll use, we have special shading pencils we use in class too, and I would kind of lighten up, the closer it gets over there. This is kind of almost like a sphere too. Underneath it wouldn't get as much light either, so I'll kind of go underneath, smudge all of that. Now, insides are something separate. They are actually opposite. I would darken in this side and get lighter here because the light's hitting here, so inside here is darker, but it's also hitting this surface, so it would be lighter. So I could darken inside of here. So on a sphere, it would be shaded over here away from the light, shading over here. Cones. Same idea, here's a cone, light's hitting it, darker over here, gradually getting lighter as you get towards the middle. And you can stop and practice this on some of your shapes too as we go. If you have a cylinder, that's sitting down on the ground, and you've got your light coming from here, this whole side is going to be dark, and we'll go over why that is in a minute when we get to flat shapes, but the darker side here would be underneath, because the light's shining on the top, it's not shining down here. And my shadow be cast right here. Now, if this is the opposite, let's say my light source was coming from here, and I have this, the cylinder kind of going the same way. This is going to be all light. The light's hitting here, but the bottom will still be the darker part. On the cylinders here, same thing. Let's say my light source is coming from here. The right side is dark. Gradually kind of lighten up. You want to leave some white there to show that it's really light. You don't want to just darken everything in. And here I would do the opposite on the inside if you happen to have an inside. Darker and then getting lighter like that. That's rounded things. Rounded things, remember, it's not kind of all or nothing. The color generally, it looks darker more gradually. Flat-sided shapes, that's not the case. With flat-sided shapes, here's some flat-sided shapes we drew the other day. So here's my eraser. Notice what happens. The light is coming through the window and it's hitting one side of the eraser and not the other. So one side appears dark, one side appears light. Sometimes you might even see a medium tone. So light, medium, dark. It pretty much is all or nothing. You're not going to have it gradually. It wouldn't be light here and then, oh, this is closer to the light, so I'll make this light half of it and half of it dark. Nope. It's kind of all or nothing with flat-sided objects. So on a shape like this, here's our cube. Let's say if the light was coming from the right, this would be light. And you could decide maybe both of these would just keep white and then just do, the darkest side might be over here away from the light. Maybe just a medium here over the whole surface. Maybe just kind of lightly shade in the whole surface. Now, if the light was coming from the same side here, it's coming from the right. But now, this side I see it, it's dark. It's away from the light. Maybe lightest on top, maybe, really light here in the front. I could also decide, maybe my light is coming more from the front. Maybe the top is lighter and the front is the very lightest. And when I add a shadow, the shadow is always connected to the shading. And we would spend a whole separate 10 minutes on class the day we were ready for the shadows, but here we go. It's always connected to the shaded area. There's our shadow. So if you wanted to make your shapes look 3D, and this is the super fast version here, so I don't lose you guys. Here's our light source, must be coming from the upper left, and you don't have to draw an arrow. That's just me showing you. So dark, dark, dark but gradual because it's a rounded shape, dark but gradual, curved over here, and then I added a shadow. Here's a shadow underneath because there's a big shape on top of a little shape, so I put a shadow. Shadow here, shadow on the ground. This is shaded. There's even a shading on this shape. So all the shapes you drew, you want to think about where the light would fall. So here I'm going to go from, same way, from the left. And I chose coming from the left because I have a bunch of right sides showing, so it makes it easier to shade. So I'll think, okay, here's a rounded shape. So rounded shape, gradual shading. Flat-sided shape, the whole side. Gradual shading, darker over here, getting lighter to the middle. Flat shape, whole side. Now here you might say, well, you know what, this is underneath it. Yeah, the whole thing might be kind of shaded there. Same thing here. This would be the lights, coming from the upper left. So this side is darker. I might darken in almost everything except the left side here. Oh, now the light really is coming in the window, which makes it harder. And you can see the little tray that I'm holding the tablet on. The shadow of that. Let me see if I can move this a little bit. And then I might have even a shadow from above. This is, casting onto the whole thing. Kind of gets mixed in with the shadow. Here's a shadow. Starts at the edge of the shading. Here's the shadow, goes to the edge. Here this thing is cast over it, so I'm going to put a shadow there. Here's a shadow. Now with spheres, it's just more of an oval because the only part of it is touching the edge, and we would talk more about this in class, but just kind of think oval shadows for spheres. Let's call it that. And at the very bottom, you need a final shadow. So here's where my shading starts. And there's this big shape over top of it, so I think actually it wouldn't just be two legs shadow here, it would be this whole big shape underneath. And in class, I usually get out a whole bunch of foam shapes we have and a flashlight, and we stack some shapes up and we show how this would be. You are welcome to try any of those things at home. Maybe today, later on, I can even try to assemble something and show you a better video, but this is just a quick thing to get you started. You want to practice shading some shapes. If you want to look up other YouTube videos that give you a good tutorial of this, I'll try to find some and link some. I hope you've had patience and you've gone through this whole thing, but this is the final step of making your shapes look very 3D. So talk to you later. Goodbye.